ce réseau-là. Ça ne peut pas être parce que l'université telle a été représentée à la première réunion que la même université va être représentée par quelqu'un d'autre à la deuxième. Il faut que ce soit des gens qui sont désignés et qui font partie de ce réseau. Et dans le profil, les spécialisations, les segments et les stratégies sur lesquels ils ont travaillé sont connus. Donc ce n'est pas des gens qui viennent pour comprendre pourquoi on est là chaque fois, mais des gens qui apportent quelque chose réellement. Alors, faire connaître notre capacité, en même temps qu'on se fait connaître, ça c'est très important. Et après, on s'est dit qu'à long terme, il faudrait éventuellement s'arrêter, s'auto-évaluer et relancer l'élan tous les 2-3 ans pour voir et définir un peu, enfin déterminer ce qui a été fait depuis la dernière fois qu'on s'est assis et où on s'est parlé. Voilà, c'est un peu ça.
Thank you very much. So I'll come to the final group. One of you take responsibility. If you can't agree, I'm gonna ask each one of you to say something. But no, it's just a broad summary of your conversation, please. Rumbi, you want to? Oh.
Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. Sorry about that. So in our group, I think there's a lot of cross-cutting issues that were already mentioned, so I won't delve in too much. But I think in the short term, I think from the way I understood the conversation, I think we had two key short-term issues that we identified. And the first was we had a conversation around the theory that's underpinning work that we are trying to do together as a collective. So there were questions about what are the theoretical underpinnings that we're actually using when we talk about orthodoxies, and there was an example around the title, that maybe there needs to be clarity in the room that what we're actually trying to push against is neoliberal economics. And based on that understanding, we can then find the alternatives that we actually want to work with. And with regards to that, there was a suggestion that in the short term, we need to be thinking of alternatives that promote pluralism. So not necessarily sticking to one or four specific types of economic thinking as alternatives, but let's keep the space open. So how do we sharpen the knowledge in this space to ensure that we have a theory that we all kind of agree on and we understand? I think there was an issue around ensuring that everybody understands what the theories actually say. Otherwise, we're not in a position to do the pushing back. So there was those discussions. Then the second was mentioned, I think, in the second group around there's need to gather more life experiences from the ground. So it's not enough just to work with the theory, but how do we bring in the lived experiences on the ground to the conversations as well. So there was a conversation about harvesting that experience in the short term. Then in the medium term, there were conversations around it might be strategic to think about resuscitating economic policy think tanks that are currently underfunded and undersupported. There were conversations on issues around knowledge and how do we influence certain spaces. So for example, curriculum development spaces with curriculums are reviewed. That was seen as a space where we could engage as an entry point. There were also issues around attending and supporting ongoing processes. So if we're talking about knowledge generation, an entry point, an example was given of the review of the African Political Theory Journal, as a space that we can actually produce papers that can influence those readers of those journals, but also get content out that is actually officially published on the narratives that we're trying to push as alternatives. So that was another. And then there's also the Nyerere Research Center, apparently that also has already been engaging on promoting those alternatives. So how can we as activists and academics and thinkers in this room also engage in those spaces? So we're not trying to recreate the wheel, but actually reinforce some of the processes that exist. Issues on mobilization were touched on. I won't stress on that. And there was a fun discussion around the use of art as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. You guys are loud. This table is very loud. Yes. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think that what you note from those group presentations, that there is, despite the groups having like separate conversations, a lot of convergency around mobilization, around knowledge generation, around lived experience. I think we had a very deep conversation about how to ensure that the research or the policies or positions we are taking are not from academic towers, but they are informed from lived experiences. So thank you very much. I would now like to call the last panel because we are running late. One know who's in the room. Could come? Tessa? This is the last panel. Tessa Musa.
Thank you very much to the contributions. I heard the discussions were really robust and people were really engaging, and I think this is part of the process of ensuring that we hear everyone's voice. I'm hoping that this last panel is not going to go into the same issues that we discussed in the groups, but to help us just to synthesize around some of the emerging important conversations that have been happening, so that we tie it up a little bit more succinctly, so that we see how to get to the end of the convening in a way that helps us to see what we are really taking forward. So just very briefly, we'd like to get some reflection, not necessarily repeating what has been said in the groups, because I think there was a lot of discussion that was very, very good and enriching, and we captured all of that, but just, the major points that can really take us forward from here, both in our individual spaces, but also as a group that came into this convening. Alvin, this is your panel.
So I'm not going to waste much time to introduce the panel. I think we'll go straight into the panel. I think, as it has been said, really the purpose of this panel is to provide us like a forward-looking perspectives in terms of, from the various conversations we have had here, how do we pull that together. And I would like to start straight with Tessa. I'll give you 5 minutes. Just share.
Good end of conference, everyone. Welcome to the last mile of the way. I hope that we will at least provide some sort of impetus for the way forward in different ways. So my background is in youth development, and I also have the opportunity to sit on the National Planning Commission of South Africa. And those two worlds intersect in this room in a way that allows me to think about the things we've been talking about in the last few days through a youth lens, but also one that's trying to engage with policy and trying to really take what many of us have said in this room over the last few days, the practical lived experiences of people in this continent, and make them into policy recommendations as we go forward. And so I want to structure my 4 minutes into a few provocations around youth. This is based on some work that we've done at the Planning Commission around what we're calling youth labor market transitions. And this is our contribution as the Planning Commission in South Africa towards the conversation around the jobs crisis, and particularly youth unemployment in South Africa, and I believe in the continent as well. So the first thing I'm going to say is that we haven't really spoken about youth much in the last few days. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. And the ways in which it's a bad thing is that often if we don't mention youth explicitly, we forget that young people constitute the majority of the continent, and that more than 60% of this continent is below the age of 30. But it's a good thing because more than 60% of this continent is below the age of 30. And so everything that we've discussed is a youth issue. Every time we say anything about the continent, about its economy, and particularly about economic activity, we are talking about the continent and its youth. And so in that way, my first provocation is that everybody in this room is a youth worker. If you're working for the development of Africa, you're actually working for the development of its youth in the main. And I want to encourage everyone to think about themselves in that way and ask yourself, what have you done to skill yourself, your organization, the groups that you work with, to understand the youth dynamics of the continent, to understand what youth development as a subsection of the development work we do would look like. And ultimately, in the question that we ask ourselves as youth development workers constantly is, what is the goal that we're trying to achieve when it comes to developing young people and the youth experience? If youth is a transition from childhood into adulthood, what is it we're doing that makes the process of young people transitioning from dependence in their families and communities to a level of autonomy and the ability to construct their own lives? And what is the picture of success we see for young people, so that when we do the work we do, whether it's in policy or in practice, we really have a goal that we see for the lives of young people. The way this is translated into the work we're doing around youth transitions into the labor market is by defining young people. And when we say youth, who do we mean? And I think that this is a really important thing, and I know that it gets said often, but it cannot be said enough. Youth are not a homogeneous category. They never are, they never will be. And when we say we want to work with youth in mind, we need to ask the question, which youth, which age category, which location, what are the challenges that they face? We cannot work for all young people in every project. And every policy that says youth is not actually a policy for all young people. And so we need to start delineating so that we know who's being missed. An example of this is if you think about conversations about higher education. In South Africa, the conversation about higher education in the last 3 years has been about the fees must fall movement and higher education access. But what's been missing from that is that a lot of people don't make it to university, but a lot of the focus has been on universities. And so we haven't been talking about technical and vocational training institutes and their needs particularly. We haven't been talking about young people who don't even finish the basic education phase and then have no options. And so fees must fall is great if you get into the institution in the first place, but what happens to everyone else? And it's thinking about who the young people are that will help us see those gaps that we might be missing, and which young people in this continent are underserviced in very dramatic fashion. The second thing is the question around disrupting narratives. And yesterday, I think it was when we were doing the wall exercise, yesterday or the day before, one of the things that came up was this question of complacency and how many people are complacent in the orthodoxies because they don't know the alternatives, they don't see the alternatives. And so we still talk in a world, for instance, where we talk about jobs. And so a young person gets into the education system, they get raised to believe that they need to have a job one day. And now we've got nuance, we're saying you either have to make job or have a job or create jobs. So we're still talking about jobs, but jobs may not be the future of the continent, and jobs may not be its current reality. There are many young people whose day-to-day experiences is about livelihood strategies and about keeping themselves economically active in very different ways than what the job market might look like, which is the reason why the language we are using is transitions into the labor market. And we're not defining the labor market as a place where you go and get a job, but as a broad space of economic opportunities where you do work and you get reward. And we need to get pathways that are multiple, that both address the fact that young people are not homogeneous, but also start to address the fact that what we think of economic opportunity is not homogeneous. If we truly believe in heterodoxies, then heterodoxies need to not only have different paths to get somewhere, but have different places to go. We need different models of what we mean by economic opportunity. And so the third provocation is about what do we need to be doing when it comes to young people themselves. And the core for us, and the thing that we learned in doing the work around youth transitions, is that we need to be talking about jobs and entrepreneurs and barriers and the ways in which young people are skilled or not skilled or matched or mismatched and the exploitative nature. We need to speak about all of those structural issues. But I believe the key thing that we need to get right on the continent right now is the psychosocial component of people getting into economic activity. There is a long history of trauma around being marginal and being disengaged. And so young people are having to either come to formal sector employment or informal sector employment or any kind of economic opportunity, needing to show great agency in the face of a lack of opportunities, but being also faced with great marginality and a lot of psychosocial issues that are not being catered for. And we need to think about what kind of agency building mechanisms are we going to create so that people can see themselves as drivers of change, that young people particularly can see themselves as being able to think outside of the norm, think outside of the constraints of society, and start creating these new versions of economic activity and start asserting themselves in rooms like this, start asserting themselves in boardrooms that they find themselves in, start asserting themselves as economic actors. And I want to give one example of this in South Africa that I think is worth thinking about before I close. There's an organization called the People's Fund, which was started off by a group of young black entrepreneurs who ran another network called the Hookup Dinner. And what they started to realize as young entrepreneurs is they were not going to get investment from the formal sector, and that the government investments into their businesses were not yielding the kind of fruits they needed because there were so many bureaucracies and red tapes. And so they took the idea of what we think of as savings groups or stokvels in our context, and they ramped it up to crowdfunding in real time. And so they're creating almost an alternate banking system around saving, around investing in each other in order to get the kinds of gains they need. And so those young people, it's taken them almost 10 years now to get to the point where they can assert that this is a real model. But before that, it took years and years of affirming them, of them having to learn through trial and error and gain the skills to actually assert that. So those are the three provocations that I want to put on the table. And what I hope we will do as we go forward is really learn the people of this continent and learn from them. It's very easy to want to teach, and especially young people. It's very easy to want to teach, but the joy of the work that I get to do is how much I learn from the young people of this continent, and I think if we do that more, we'll understand more what their future looks like.
Thank you very much, Tess. I'll now go to Musa.
Merci. Je voudrais réagir pour dire peut-être ce que j'ai retenu de nos discussions à partir de ma propre sensibilité, notamment sur les suites à donner à cette réunion. Et le premier point sur lequel j'insisterai, c'est une question de posture ou d'état d'esprit. Je dis pour dire qu'il me semble que dans notre orientation, il est important de ne pas rester dans la réaction. Même s'il faut très bien connaître, on a dit le système orthodoxe, hégémonique, mais ne pas rester à réagir à ce que disent les autres. Et j'avais déjà dit aller vers l'affirmation. Ça ne veut pas dire que nous pensons que tout va nous réussir, mais vraiment aller vers l'affirmation. Le deuxième, nous devons mettre le focus sur les transformations concrètes en lien avec le quotidien des Africains. Donc ici, il y a toujours ce décalage entre, disons, les élites intellectuelles et les autres acteurs qu'il nous faut confronter. Et le troisième, c'est dans la communication. Je crois qu'on ne doit pas tomber dans le piège du Africa Rising, décider du dehors et rester dans des illusions. Mais j'insiste pour dire que nous devons être dans le point de dire c'est possible. Parce qu'il y en a qui cherchent systématiquement tout ce que nous soulevons à nous décourager et à montrer que ça ne vaut rien et à disqualifier. Le deuxième est justement... donc c'est possible de déterminer, conditionné par notre détermination. Le deuxième point justement sur lequel je voudrais insister, c'est l'engagement. J'ai beaucoup entendu ici, nous, le groupe, etc. Et on a insisté sur le fait qu'il faut des moyens. Ce n'est pas seulement l'argent, pour moi c'est l'engagement, c'est la détermination. Et donc, qui nous? Est-ce que nous sommes un carrefour regroupé par Trust Africa et puis on se rend compte et on repart dans nos quotidiens? Est-ce qu'on veut avoir une convergence? Je dis c'est pas donné. Les coalitions, les réseaux, toujours on dit c'est la solution. À chaque rencontre, on discute, on dit on met en place un réseau. Mais le faisant, nous formons une société et dans ces sociétés, il y a des mécanismes souvent qui neutralisent tous les aspects de changement et ce qui devait être une solution devient un problème et nous alourdit. Donc, ok, pour aller vers plateforme des réseaux, mais mettons en avant, je dis, cette détermination et surtout la concertation. La concertation pour pouvoir relier tous nos efforts. On a beaucoup discuté des groupes cibles. Et je crois que ces groupes sont tous importants, que ce soit les institutions, les acteurs dédiés à la production de savoir, les mouvements sociaux, les OSC, les décideurs, les partenaires techniques et financiers, les citoyens avec l'accent sur les jeunes et les femmes. Je voudrais dire qu'on devrait aussi surtout mettre l'accent sur un renforcement de capacité dans cette passerelle entre académiciens et mouvements sociaux, des acteurs de la société qui portent les transformations pour que l'on devienne le plus conscient possible des enjeux. Et ce sont ces organisations qui travaillent le plus possible avec les citoyens. Mais à notre échelle, peut-être voir toucher directement les citoyens, ça demande une organisation qui va être difficile. Il y a beaucoup d'organisations qui le font, mais qui ne sont pas nourries peut-être par tout ce qu'on a ici comme réflexion. Et c'est cette passerelle-là, de passeur de savoir, je crois, qui est essentielle. Je finis peut-être sur, pour moi, ce qui seraient les effets importants de cette rencontre. Le premier, c'est que je voudrais voir qu'il est mis en place un espace d'échange et de production qui crédibilise scientifiquement, politiquement, culturellement, des projets de société qui sont porteurs d'inclusion et de convivialité pour tous. Mais aussi, si cela est fait, quels sont les modes d'organisation sociale, économique, politique qui concrétisent cela. Donc je suis dans l'axe de l'affirmation parce que nous avons dit que derrière toute la science, derrière toute l'économie, il y a des projets de société et nous devons travailler dans ce sens-là pour des alternatives. Deuxièmement, sont créées des passerelles dynamiques entre chercheurs, organisations de société civile, décideurs progressistes qui permettent de décrypter et de réduire ou neutraliser les effets de l'orthodoxie sur les enjeux qui sont essentiels pour les peuples africains. Et troisièmement, puisqu'il faut se projeter ensemble dans l'avenir et lancer ou consolider un agenda africain de fondation de la pensée du développement et d'enrichissement, de crédibilisation de ces alternatives dans cette connexion-là entre académiciens, mouvements sociaux et parmi les décideurs, ceux qui vont dans ce sens-là. Donc ce qui demande voilà, de travailler à la capacitation par la transmission des savoirs, je crois qu'il y a eu, je ne les reprends pas, beaucoup de propositions dans ce sens-là, au réseautage avec le bémol que j'ai dit, à des passerelles, les partenariats et aussi à l'action par la production d'études et un programme ambitieux de recherche. Merci.
Thank you very much, Musa. Now I'll call upon Carlos. Yes, yeah, sure.
Thank you. I am a scholar, so I'm going to talk mostly about, from the perspective of a scholar leading with the teaching, research, and so on. One of the key problems with the economics teaching, economics research over the last 4 decades or so is the dominance and the hegemony around new classical economics. And that is something that needs to be challenged. So one of the key aims of any change in that particular area is to bring about the possibility of pluralism in economic thinking. Pluralism by itself will not address any of the problems that we have in terms of policy making, in terms of efficiency, social efficiency of that policy in economic change, if there is any, if that is ever a question. It will offer the possibility to discuss the issues, to have access to different methodologies, tools and of analysis, and in the academia to train people in different ways of thinking with different tools of thinking, different methodologies and so on, rather than what we are doing now, that is creating this group of highly skilled technically people who are incapable of thinking critically, independently, and doing serious research. Another key aim of change would be the relationship between the research and teaching with relevant issues of our time, and that is one of the aims of opening to a pluralist approach, is to relate economic thinking, economic teaching and economic research to real issues, to relevant issues of our lives, moving away from the limitations of new classical models. And finally, another fundamental aim would be, in relation to the previous point, the ability to support and to root that teaching and that research, to support social movements and to root in social movements and the fundamental questions that social movements and the social society and so brings about. And for that, one of the things I would concretely propose is that we don't use in our conference titles and in our approaches words like orthodoxy and heterodoxy. And the reason for that is that orthodoxies are many, and if we need to identify exactly which ones are we addressing, or we can say we are addressing all of them, and that's not possible to actually seriously debate. And heterodoxies are a very pluralistic, a very broad set of theories and methodologies and so on, which are in conflict with each other in their aims, in their methodologies, in their paradigms. So when we start using orthodoxies and heterodoxies in our debates, we tend to hide the questions we want to discuss. Now, let me move into 2 points. One point is some issues I think we need to address. And the second point is processes or means we can use to address them. One is to start working more on understanding what is going on. So we need to use whatever our theories, methods, and so on are to do research to analyze what is going on, to analyze the political economy of our economies, of our societies, of our villages, or whatever we want to analyze, but to do that more and enrich that by sharing and debating. That kind of activity, on one hand, allows theory to develop, allows the orthodoxies not to develop, or at least to become entrenched, and allows the life to be better understood. Therefore, we can work better with the knowledge we have. But it also provides us with methodologies, with analytical frameworks that we can learn from in order to spread that kind of analysis in other places. Not copy them, but learn from and see what questions to ask, what tools we do have, what concepts we can utilize, how relevant they are, how adequate they are, what do we need to construct more that allows us to better and deeper understand the life and the reality and so on we need to address. Another issue is clarification of concepts. It was already said in the group, so I'm not going to spend time on that. But I would like us to be aware that we cannot, again, get stuck on buzzwording, like orthodoxies, heterodoxies, we and the others, development, and so these are buzzwording of things that we sometimes don't understand and that they don't actually help analytically. They hide the issues, they create a lot of confusion, and although they create also a market for activity. The third thing that we need, that I think that we can work on is conversations within what we now consider to be heterodox approaches, which are very different, in conflict with each other, and have a common point. And the common point is that they oppose neoclassical economics, but that's a very low common point for analytical debate. But we need to have that kind of conversation. We need to have that kind of debate. The fourth theme is that we need to look at different levels and different themes of debate. In this conference, a large part of the people mentioned the need to go from bottom up. Others mentioned the need to go from up to the bottom. Some people focus on communities, some people focus on national level or global level. And all these levels of analysis need to be articulated. They are all relevant and they all need to be articulated, as well as different themes, gender or environment or issues of macroeconomics or whatever are themes that are related to each other and need to be also articulated. So one area of research is actually looking at what is being done that articulates these levels of analysis, these themes, and also what has been done that disarticulates it. And so we need to look at this kind of issues. One other issue is the point that these debates that we are having here are also being carried on elsewhere in the world, and we need to connect with them. There are things we can learn from, there are things we can teach, but mostly we need to be part of it. There is a broad debate in Europe, in the United States, in Asia, in Latin America. This debate against neoclassical economics. It's not against neoclassical economics, against the dominance of neoclassical economics, the debate for a pluralistic approach to economics, and the debate to organize analysis around what are the relevant theories and processes of analysis that respond to challenges of our times. These things are going on elsewhere in the world, and we need to relate to that, to be part of that, and not close ourselves in our continent only. The final point in terms of topics, in terms of themes that I would like to mention is the issue of quality of and research at our universities now. And I'm not even talking about paradigms, I'm talking about quality. I just will give a very quick example. I'm aware about the limitations of time. For example, I had this student of mine that wanted to go and do a PhD in the United States. And he asked me what my suggestion was for him. And I said, well, I don't know what you want to do. And he said, well, I want to do something in econometrics. And I asked him, but why are you discussing how you are going to do something when you don't know what you want to do at the moment? So my suggestion is first think about what you want to do, why that is relevant, what are the thinking behind that, what are the connections with life that your research are trying to address, and then try to choose the how you do that, not the other way around. But that doesn't reflect the limitation of that student, reflects the culture of economic teaching, research, and so on that has been developed. So I think that these would be themes that I'd like to address in terms of work in the scholar area. Let me very quickly look at processes. One is publications. In the group work, ROAP was mentioned, the Review of African Political Economy, and I know that ROAP is interested in having special issues, addressing specific topics. ROAP is a very progressive journal, and the idea is not only to publish scientific work, but also to use that work in broader debates and training of scholars, of young people, young researchers, and so on in the African continent. So we can use things like that and try to publish work, and at the same time use this kind of publications in broader social context. Another thing is teaching. A lot of the debates here were very interesting and can be brought back into teaching. And although we all economic teachers face the limitations of the curricula that you have to address and so on, that those limitations are not absolute. We can actually make changes to that. I was talking to James yesterday, and his presentation today was a very interesting one. And my point was how to bring the research and knowledge and so on they are producing into, for example, teaching of growth economics within the context of the current challenges of climate change and so on. And that can be done. The curriculum is there, but nothing prevents me as a teacher from doing that kind of thing. Yep, sorry? Sure. So, so this is one thing, is to bring new content into teaching, creating spaces for that. But we can also create spaces outside the normal curriculum to do that. And the third point, I have two more processes. The third process is the training of researchers. And there is this experience with the Nyerere Research Center, which every year they have a 2-week or 3-week program teaching on different issues of political economy analysis, and things like that can be organized in different countries, different areas of the continent, and generalized. And the final point I'd like to mention is the issue of institution organization. It's difficult to have a progressive kind of analysis in economics teaching everywhere at the same time, but this should not not tried. But on the other hand, we may also benefit from having some kind of concentration, some kind of either regular symposiums, conferences, and so on, or courses, or even institutes that concentrate on heterodox economic thinking and research. The final thing I would like to say very briefly is that we have sometimes mentioned it, but not probably enough, is that if we want to have a confrontation with the fundamentals of neoclassical economics and move forward in economics teaching and research and in changing our lives and so on, we may be faced with the fact that we may not be able to save capitalism, and it may not be worth trying to save capitalism. So we may be faced with the fact that we, in the choices of paradigms and theories and methodologies, we may have to find those that are relevant for overcoming capitalism, and not to try, unfortunately, without any success over the last 300 years, to stabilize it.
Thank you very much. Because when you give a teacher a mic, it's very difficult to pull it away again. No, I think that we have had quite some diverse feedbacks that have come. I think what for me jumps out is how they connect, first between themselves, but also how they feed into and provide some level of concreteness in terms of the propositions that we emerged out of the group work. I like to open it up, but only for just, please, if there's any burning comment, no questions. If there's any specific burning comment you'd like to make to any of the submissions that were made, I'll open it up for just 2 minutes. None. That is good. I think it's... So I wouldn't be blamed. Let me try to provide a very short summary. I think that from what Tessa was saying, I think recognizing that the youth is a critical constituency for the conversations we are having here. And I think when we discuss knowledge, when we discuss education, when we discuss research, mobilization, all these areas, I think it's really, really important to ensure that we have the youth at the heart of that conversation. And I liked very much when she put it and said that we need to see all ourselves as youth workers. This is something that we all don't see. We see ourselves as activists, as researchers, but the policies that we are pursuing and changing have direct implication to a very significant portion of the population. And second point that I think that came across the three speakers is the idea of disrupting narratives. And we can't disrupt narratives if we are using buzzwords. That I think is the thing that connects between the three speakers in terms of how do we ensure that the language that we are using is a language that identifies and maps out the problem without necessarily complicating it. A friend of mine usually says, let's avoid complicating simple things, but at the same time, let's not oversimplify complex matters. The third point, I think, that I picked out of the three presentation is that the point of working in silos and the need to create convergence spaces so that we are not seeing ourselves as researchers, ourselves as activists, as mobilizers. I think that the need for identifying and creating spaces of convergence is really important. And lastly, the other point I think is the formations of orthodoxies is happening particularly in the academia. And it is a very important battleground. I think that, Carlos, is the point that you also made very clearly. So beyond just knowledge generation, how do we ensure that the dominating, like how do we ensure that the messages that we are passing is also going through the academic spaces? And I think that we had similar issues coming up yesterday. So thank you very much. Again, please we hands together for I think what has been a very insightful panel. I will now call upon I think I can dismiss the panel, then call upon the final closing session.
Thank you very much for that wonderful summary and 3 points that I think, yes, have resonated throughout the 3 days. As the closing speakers come up, I'd like to alert you to an email that Amandine has sent, should be in your inbox as we speak, that is to help us to hear what how you feel at this particular moment in time, after 3 days, after a marathon, after in-depth and expansive as well conversations, after a lot of thought and input from each one of you. How do you feel right now? We can have a brief conversation about that now as the speakers come up, but also please take time to fill in the questionnaire that Amandine has sent. It should be in your mailboxes now. If you could do it before you leave, before you start packing, and give it back to us so that we have your feedback on how you felt about the whole convening, the process, what was successful for you, what you feel we need to work on so that we keep your energies engaged in this process. So please do look at your email and respond to that questionnaire. Does anyone need a hard copy? As in you do not have a laptop here to fill it in? No one? Okay. So we'll take time to do that before the end. Right, we are here. We tried to catch 4 o'clock. We're just a few minutes over. And I will give back to the leaders of this convening, representing Trust Africa and Institute for Economic Justice, who have been the organizers of the convening, of bringing us together, to say a few words in conclusion and to provide some aspects of how we move forward. Oh, and Osiwa Mohammed.
Thanks, everybody. I know what the answer is to what was just asked, and that is totally exhausted. I know that everybody, it's been a grueling but exciting and interesting 3 days, and want to thank all of you for that. I asked Ibrahim if I could be excused from this panel, and he refused to allow that, so of course I respected his decision. So I'm really not going to say very much, except to say that we have taken careful notes of everything that everybody has said. We've received the feedback, both about the positives and the negatives, and we hopefully get more feedback from the questionnaires. And we pledge to improve next time in relation to areas where we can improve. And we recognize, as with all these events, not everything is run perfectly, but for one thing, from my side, I found it incredibly stimulating to be exposed to this incredibly rich array of talent and thinkers on the continent. So on behalf of the Institute for Economic Justice, just want to thank you all and hope this isn't the last time that we see each other as a group. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mohammed with the Open Society Foundations. I'll try to be very brief. I don't have much to add to what Neil said and to what many have said, but just to really thank everyone for the patience, the dynamism, the enthusiasm, and the openness with which you all approached these past grueling 3 days. But I guess necessary 3 days. OSF is the single largest private funder of human rights activities in the world, and we take pride in being clear about our attachment to those values, particularly of human dignity, of opportunity, of respect, and it is in that vein and in that continuation that we see questions of economic justice as central to how societies are structured and how they affect the daily lives of people. This question is one that underpins a lot of our work on economic justice throughout the continent, and I would say throughout the world. And it was imperative for us to continue to be clear, particularly from the African standpoint, from the African Regional Office and our colleagues, that we want to continue to provide spaces for African thinkers, African actors, African activists to exercise their agency and to chart a way forward to determine a path that may look very different than others. And so it is with a lot of ambition and enthusiasm that we embarked on this with Just Africa and with IEJ, whom I'd like to thank very much, but it is also with humility that we sit here and that we understand that these questions are huge, and we are moved by, again, the feedback we've gotten and the enthusiasm in the room, and we want to be sure to continue to be partners in this effort going forward, and this was certainly not a one-off. So we will be continuing to have conversations and to find ways that we can continue to support this. And again, a huge thank you to everyone, and especially to the people that have helped make this happen. Sonia, Amandine in particular, and everyone at Just Africa and IEJ that put in a considerable amount of work. The translators, I think we should give them a huge round of applause for their work. And thank you to both of you as well for the openness and the collegial way in which this happened. It is a very difficult thing to do. And so I would also please encourage you to say a big thank you to these two gentlemen and their team. And that's it. So thank you again so much, and hope you can enjoy, for those of you that are coming from far, a few hours in Dar and enjoy this wonderful, wonderful city. Thank you. Some live music and food and all the wonderful things that this African city has to offer. Thank you so much.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's much more to say. But first, I just want to again recognize the presence of Yassine Fall among ourselves here. Yassine is one of the leading feminist economists of this continent. She was the executive secretary of AWOD, the Association of African Women Researchers for Development, for many years, and has done a lot of things all around. And we were, her name appeared in so many different, conversations that we've been having all along. But she's been able to join us here. She was supposed to be.
My friend Marina.
Well, there you go.
We worked for 20 years together at economists, and I came here especially.
Well, thank you for coming, and thanks to everybody. Look, this has been an absolutely wonderful conversation, and I just realized that, I think I'll remain an eternal student every time I sit in these meetings. You realize that there's so much you don't know, and there's so much you can still learn by listening to people and by interacting with them. So it's been a very enriching process, and it's been, absolutely wonderful to be here. And so, of course, I think Neil has said it, we have heard some of the feedback. We're expecting to get more feedback, and we will note everything. And we, regret again the challenges that there have been, travel-related challenges, but also challenges that have to do with our own inabilities. Right? We have not always been very good at managing time, including the great plans we had for yesterday evening, and the thing dragged on a little bit longer than we had planned, and we missed an opportunity to enjoy a beautiful space as you have seen. But we hope you've given you a sense of what the museum is like and how beautiful it is, and that you will actually fly back to Dakar for those of you who don't live here to go and visit it in a much more proper way. I think this is, I just want to say maybe 2 or 3 other things very quickly. I mean, in an interview with Amadi Ali Jeng that was published in Development and Change, the same journal that published that article by Tandika, the interview with Tandika and Kate Mega that was circulated, Samir said development is about building a new civilization. Right? And in that sense, development is about something that is of relevance to the whole world, right? Including the so-called developed world. Because it's about taking into account all the problems that we have with the world as it is now, right? And all that feminist critics, ecological critics, and environmentalists, and anti-imperialists, and class-related criticisms that have been made to the development model and to the world. And therefore, you build something different. And I think it's more than building something that is just the opposite of all that problematic world, but actually a much better world than that. And I think really talking about challenging orthodoxies, in a sense, it is taking the root of the building of that civilization, in a sense. And I think it's definitely looking at it very closely. It's about building a new world. It's about getting ourselves out of a complete mess as it is now in terms of what it is having in effects. And that's not easy to do, particularly when you have to, if you want to do it well, or at least you want to do it connecting with all those who are engaged in it. It's a plurality of people, of institutions, of voices, and of spaces, and of institutions and so on. And that's what we try to begin doing here by reaching out to so many people and institutions, and in response to the invitation by the Open Society Initiative to engage in this process. But the big challenge related to that is actually has to do with ourselves in the first place, because it means you are connecting people and institutions and people and places and times and practices and methods and habits, and cultures that are very different. And to have a dialogue between all those different actors and players is not an easy thing to do. When even you think you are doing it well, then you realize actually no, I have been taking, because ultimately everybody would tend to think that where I come from, my own group, my own community, scholarly community, is actually the one that does what we are doing best, right? But you tend to relapse back to your own way of doing things and of your own way of looking at things, including your own way of organizing conferences as you do it. I've been organizing conferences for 20 years as a scholar. It was a very straightforward, straight-jacket thing. You bring them together, they write papers, you talk, you're happy, you go. Right? And then suddenly I found myself having to do a conference differently, and realizing that actually, well, I have a lot of things to learn also, including just how to do conferences, even after having organized them for 20 years. But the point here is, I think it's, on a very much more serious note, is that it means actually making a big effort to do some kind of introspection. And I think that came out in the presentations earlier on, particularly the panel this morning on gender, and some of the presentations that came out the day before yesterday. Where that, like, what are we doing? Where are we speaking from? Are we taking into account fully, what is the challenge that we have to deal with internally as well? So that is the thing, and that process will have to continue, and I think we'll also learn by doing, right? We'll improve as we go along. Next time we do things, we'll do them better. I think the other things have been said about many things, gender and the orthodoxies and class. The dimension of class came out very well, Marina, the point this morning. Gender and environmental issues, gender and youth, orthodoxies and youth, and environment, different spaces, different issues. So it's a huge undertaking. It's an absolutely huge undertaking to challenge orthodoxies if you want to keep tracking them in the different spaces and different realms in which they are playing out. And that is the task actually to be undertaken. And it's not a one-person thing, it's not a one institution thing, it's not even a one-continent thing. This is a global struggle. I think Neil was the one who was referring to also the Greek experience, and to Portugal and to other experiences that occur. So it's going to go on for a long time. It's going to involve a lot of players. It's going to involve the building of strategies and multiple ways of engaging. And I think what you remember also, the point came out yesterday in our group work, that there's also a way in which those we are trying to influence, those who have a stake in the orthodoxies as they are playing it now, are not going to sit by and just watch. They will be fighting back, and they are fighting back. And it is that fighting back is taking many forms. In some instances, I think somebody talked about militarization that was not mentioned very much in the debate, but that's how far it can go. One case, London in Zimbabwe, the way that crisis was resolved was actually through military means, right, to resolve it. I'm saying this because it is happening at a time when we see a shrinking of the spaces of critical reflection on this continent in particular. That, in other words, you are saying ordinarily, even if you link this discussion to the more general political processes that are going on, you really know actually how formidable the task is, because you really have to also take into account the fact that, well, you know what, there are many ways in which we have to prepare us for a difficult struggle, including from the point of view of what the reactions could be of all kinds. The repression is one kind. The other one is just, literally neglecting you in your little corner, dismissing you as irrelevant or as an ideological critique of things. And so, in other words, dismissing your work, serious work, as non-scientific or as non-pertinent. And you have to deal with, and when you have to deal with all the things like, including even funding, right? You may not even find it difficult if you don't approach certain funders. So I think we are fortunate to have a partner like the Open Society Initiative for West Africa and the Open Society Foundations in general that have understood the importance of this particular problem and that are willing to, and that have put resources into getting this conversation to be brought at least to the level where we are with it. And I'm sure you are engaged in it in other places as well. So it's a reason for definitely saying we appreciate the support, we appreciate the trust, because we had the space to work this out as we understood it, as we thought we needed to frame it. We don't the expression of interest. We invited the people we thought we should invite, and we are very fortunate, to get an extraordinary, group of people here. Some of whom I just knew by name, and then I discovered actually people I need to get to know much better because I have a lot to learn by listening to them. And that is absolutely wonderful. So thank you very much, Mohammed, who was our vis-a-vis commandee, entry point and link person to the system. And I would like to thank all the people from the foundations, actually some coming from very far, who are in the room here, who made this possible. I think if anybody deserves applause, it is the foundation as well for having made it possible. Yeah, and thanking all the moderators, panel moderators, the rapporteurs, the interpreters have been thanked. Sonia, Amandine, and then Ehadi, Rugia too, who were behind the scenes doing all the work and running around and doing, and Abdurrahman with the communications. It's been streamed live actually, and people have been tweeting and sending, summaries of these to discussion groups in different places. I think that was extraordinary, and Butule has been part of the reference group. And more generally, the reference group as a whole, some of whom, joined us by Skype on the first day of the conference. Others, are here in the room. We would like to thank everybody for having, been part of this conference, for having contributed so much to making it happen. Gilad is the other co-conspirator in this whole process. You've seen him at work, how well he facilitated the conversation here. He's been really very good, and even when we had our small planning meeting in Johannesburg, he was also the one who was really leading us, with the creative ways in which he was getting us to get the ideas out. But you see, when you are coming from that old-fashioned traditional way of doing things, where you actually get to know that, look, research is not about finding answers, basically, social research. It's more like asking the right questions. That is the primary task of a social researcher, is to be able to ask the right questions. Mamdani has written on this extensively in response to the tendency for researchers to take themselves as consultants. Basically researchers think very often you write 2-3 pages and then you come with recommendations. right? You write a piece that is 20 pages long, then it ends with recommendations. I say, hey, that is not really what, as an academic researcher, traditional academic researcher, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be able to ask the right questions and get the thinking to, and mobilize the data that you need to support, analysis and so on. So you get that tradition, and then you confront it with people that say, look, we're trying to change things here because we see how children are suffering, power is influenced negatively on households, on families, and so on gender. That conversation is a very rich conversation, but I think that's what we need to understand, that we are coming from different perspectives. So thank you one more time again to everybody. Thanks to, I think the interpreters, will thank them never enough. Somebody has been walking around taking pictures. This is Papa Ismail. He's also been tweeting and has been very helpful in documenting this whole process. And we would like to really thank all of you for taking your time to be here, for joining this conversation, and saying that stay tuned, stay connected. This is going to go on. It is going to go on in all the possible spaces in which you want it to go on. And we'll connect with all the initiatives that we know about. And if you know about other initiatives, please help us connect them. All the documentation, the point was made in the first day. Whoever has a reference that is important to read, or know about an experience that we need to know about, that can enrich this whole process, please, just draw our attention to it, and then we will make sure that we share it with the rest of the group. Thank you very, very, very much to also the panelists who just finished the panel that preceded this particular session. And I think apart from encouraging those of you who are still around tomorrow, maybe to go to Gore, it's not so far from here, to enjoy the music. Dakar is known for having very, very nice spots where you can eat good chof and at the same time, enjoy Yusundur, if it's a Friday evening or a Saturday evening. But also there are other small groups that play here. So, merci beaucoup à tous, and we'll see each other again.